Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have two more good martinis for you today, following up on all three of them being good yesterday. We also have a very special time at the end of today's episode, which we will get to in due order, but stick around for that. You're definitely going to enjoy it, especially if you're a longtime listener to the Three Martini Lunch. Jim, let's get on with good martini number one. And this story from Politico actually broke, I think, on Wednesday, talking about how Democrats are very, very nervous about Pennsylvania, which I think both campaigns would probably argue is the most important swing state this year, certainly the one with the most electoral votes. And so in this Politico story, there is kind of a lot of Democratic backbiting. On the one hand, a lot of folks saying they're still confident they're going to win, but they're not very confident in Nikki Lou, who is the Harris campaign's campaign manager in Pennsylvania. But here's how Politico writes it. Harris's path to victory depends on her ability to turn out the heavily Democratic voters in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and their surrounding suburbs, a coalition that relies on a strong performance with voters of color. If the campaign can't get them to the polls, the state and the presidential race could be lost. Quote, I feel like we're going to win here, but we're going to win it in spite of the Harris state campaign, said a Democratic elected official in the state, who, like others for this story, was granted anonymity to speak freely about a sensitive matter. Quote, Pennsylvania is such a mess, and it's incredibly frustrating. If you needed any other indication, this is an important note today that you wrote about in the corner. Bob Casey, who is running for a fourth term in the U.S. Senate against Dave McCormick, is not confident that his Democratic bona fides are going to get him over the finish line. And so he's put out an ad talking about how independent he is from the current administration and how he's actually teamed up with Donald Trump before.
I'm a Republican.
And I'm a Democrat.
Our marriage, pure bliss. But on politics, we just don't agree. Except for Bob Casey. He's independent.
That's right.
Casey's leading the effort to stop corporate greedflation and price gouging. Casey bucked Biden to protect fracking. And he sided with Trump to end NAFTA and put tariffs on China to stop them from cheating.
So in this House, we agree. It's Bob Casey who's doing right by Pennsylvania.
I'm Bob Casey, and I definitely approve this message.
If the woman's a Republican, she shouldn't be all excited about the corporate greedflation crackdown because it's a total canard. But nonetheless, Jim, if he was super confident, the guy who votes, what was it, 98.5% of the time?
98.5, right around human body temperature, unless you're Yahya Sinwar. If you think Bob Casey is a terrific lawmaker, you're not really a Republican. I'm sorry. He found the two times he's ever disagreed with the rest of his party and the Democratic Party, and that's it. Those are the two you can find. He's independent. He's the biggest maverick since Tom Cruise and John McCain. No, he is a lockstep Democrat. So if you're a Republican, wow, I love this guy. Like, I can see what he sees in her. She is the cheapest date you're ever going to find. I should not make fun of other people's inter-ideological marriages. But
they're not actually married. They're actors.
Okay, well, there you go. But that makes more sense because if Bob Casey is what's holding your marriage together, I think it's time, even the kids are saying, Mom, Dad, it's time to go your separate ways. This is not working. So,
what do you make of the larger picture in Pennsylvania?
So you get like that's so I don't want to downplay the Politico article. I will say that when you read through it, there are two segments. The first is clearly there's a rivalry between the Philadelphia Democrats and the Pittsburgh Democrats, and the Philadelphia Democrats feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. Now, Philadelphia's got a bigger population, so if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather overperform in Philadelphia than I do in Pittsburgh. I don't know whether it's that critical an error, and we should point out most of the polling in Pennsylvania has it neck and neck. It's not like you could say, Trump has now surged to be way ahead. But I do also notice that a lot of the complaints in this were there hasn't been enough money sent my way. There hasn't been enough outreach my way. Well, my preferred figures weren't invited to the rally. It sounds a little whiny and ticky-tack, and, people's egos haven't been stroked. And that is part of politics, but I'm not sure that necessarily translates to a dramatic drop in the number of votes that are cast for Kamala Harris. But the flip side of this is that in 2016, we now know from books that came out after the election that the Hillary Clinton campaign had all kinds of problems, particularly in Michigan. In Florida, lack of polling on the ground, so they felt like they didn't really know how well they were doing, stuff like that. Robbie Mook made all kinds of bad decisions on that campaign, and you didn't hear about any of this because the entire coverage of up till Election Day was the Hillary Clinton campaign is a well-oiled machine, the engine is revving, everything's going great, and look at those stumble bums over there in the Donald Trump campaign who don't know what they're doing. Well, as well know, Trump won. And in fact, there were a whole bunch of reports of these problems. The reporters who knew about them had deals to not write about any of them until after the election. And that's why after Trump had won, now it can be told, hey, you know that narrative of the Hillary Clinton campaign being a well-oiled machine? Never mind. So is it good news for Democrats? This is coming out now and people are saying that there's problems and rattles in the engine? Or is it an indicator that there's no discipline in the Harris campaign and people aren't afraid of telling these stories? Either way, you put these two. And right after the Corner Post came up, someone pointed out that Tammy Baldwin, who's the incumbent Democratic senator in Wisconsin who's running for re-election, also mentions that she had one of her bills signed into law by President Trump. So maybe it's not quite as heavy as Casey says. But all of a sudden, these endangered Senate Democrats are like, look at all the stuff that Trump did that signed into law. See, I'm not that anti-Trump, which I don't think is... You don't run those ads if Kamala Harris is winning those states comfortably.
How do you turn around, though, and say, you got to elect me because, I'm fighting against people like Donald Trump and who's the greatest threat to democracy of all time. And then your next ad is, actually, Donald Trump and I got along pretty well. We got this done together.
I know how to work with the greatest threat to democracy of all time. We can bipartisan cooperate to make this country better before he destroys it.
Yeah, and in some ways, you're helping him because, Tammy Baldwin says I'm okay.
He's the monster who signs good bills into law.
Yes, exactly. But in terms, Jim, of the campaign, the Harris campaign, and their desperation, I've got a Doris update for you. For those who aren't familiar, Doris is the person that the DNC keeps randomly sending emails to, but they end up in my account. So I've always enjoyed this because back when it was Biden, it just assumed that Biden would get my name wrong and refer to me as Doris, and it would make perfect sense.
I'm just picturing you meeting Biden. And Doris, it's great to meet you. I love that everything you do on Video America or whatever the place is over there. I used to listen to the radio, FDR all the time, and and here in Radio Canada. So where are you? Angola? Where am I today?
Yes. So not surprising. They're sending out a blitz of fundraising emails to all these people who are on their list. This was October 15th, Tuesday. Today is a great day to donate for the first time to elect Kamala Harris, Doris. Then they send one at 11:54 with a little moon in the subject line saying, before you go to sleep, let us explain, Doris, about why Doris needs to make her first one. Then the next day, it's, we need you on this list, Doris. Today alone, thousands of Democrats have chipped into our campaign. Now they're counting on you to join them. This was yesterday. Here's what we have on file for you. A big fat zero for this year's campaign. Yeah.
Look, fat.
They're not happy with
Doris.
Doris.
Writing these messages himself.
So,
yeah, lion, dog-faced, pony soldier, give me your money.
That's exactly right. It's time to make your first donation, Doris. Oh, I can't imagine how much fun they're having with this. I mean, it's all automated, but still, it's hilarious to watch.
I did get one. I, too, have someone who previously owned my cell phone, and thus, I'm getting these texts. And they gave me what's her name? It was Deborah, I believe. For some reason, D names are people going to say, Jim and Greg have alter egos. This is their, split personality personas. Deborah, we're getting tired of emailing you. Oh, well, that makes two of us because I'm getting tired of these texts. My standard format is to respond. I hate these spam texts. I hate them so much. I am donating the legal maximum to your opponent. Bad word, bad word, bad word. Signed, Deborah. And because I don't want to get blamed for this. It's evil Deborah. She's the one who does this. But I just want to point out that, you realize these messages are 1 second away from, Doris, if you don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and find us at the foot of your bed with, jumper cables and a car battery and a dwarf in a clown makeup, you will donate right now, Doris. Don't make me ask again.
Funny you should mention that. They sent
We're fighting for women, Doris. Don't make me knock you around like Emhoff.
Jeez. They sent me one before at 4:54 this morning saying, Doris, if you're like us, the thought of Donald Trump in the White House might be keeping you up at night, because in just 18 days, we will either be charting a new way forward with Kamala or taking a giant step back. Will you rush your first donation to help elect Kamala Harris in 18 days? And at the bottom of the emails, it goes, but Doris, we don't want to bother you. If you'd like to unsubscribe from all Harris for President emails, you can click here. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm unsubscribing. This is the best political entertainment I'm getting all day, other than talking to Jim.
This is turning into this like complicated psychological drama portrait of a Democratic fundraiser slowly losing their mind, and only Doris is listening. They need the money for therapy and chamomile tea to help them get to sleep, apparently.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what direction you need to go in if you want to get control of your metabolism, and that is with Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. Literally, all you have to do is wake up, grab your Lumen, take a deep breath in, exhale into your Lumen, and it'll tell you, are you burning fats? Are you burning carbs? And if so, what's the best nutritional plan for the day? It also factors in your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management, whatever you want to tell it.
Your metabolism is your body's engine, Doris. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, ideal metabolic health translates to a whole host of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. And Lumen can give you recommendations to improve your metabolic health.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, on to our second good martini now. And this is actually a really exciting one beyond the political realm, because this is an issue that should have been dealt with a long time ago. And it's interesting that it's actually big tech that's leading the way here, and the government is helping them, which is good. This should have happened decades ago, but 3 Mile Island and the China syndrome and all that nonsense got the left anti-nuclear when it comes to just nuclear power. Forget nuclear weapons. But now, as you write in today's Morning Jolt, some of America's biggest tech companies concluded they need more energy to run their data centers, and boy, do we know about those around here in Northern Virginia, in the decades to come. And they decided that restarting decommissioned nuclear plants was the best, most cost-effective, and most reliable option. So you've got Microsoft, which is actually taking over one of the reactors from 3 Mile Island, not the one that melted down, but one of the other ones. Amazon is developing small modular reactors in different places around the country and just signed a deal with Dominion Energy here in Virginia. Also, Google saying that it will purchase power from small modular reactor developer Kairos Power as tech companies increasingly turn to nuclear power. And out in Michigan, the Energy Department said on Monday it had finalized a $1.5 billion loan guarantee to help a company restart a shuttered nuclear plant there. So, Jim, in terms of providing energy long term, nuclear is probably the one that rational people on both sides of the aisle could definitely agree on, because it's reliable. It's been used very safely in Europe for many, many years now. This is a common sense way to move forward. Glenn Youngkin's been pushing this. As you point out in the Jolt, you've got a bipartisan list of governors who are behind this. So hopefully there's momentum for this beyond the election, because it's a much more reliable way to do something other than fossil fuels that's not relying on wind and sun, which can never, ever come close to making up the capacity we need.
Greg, as we alluded, this is the good martini. It is really fantastic news for the country. And so I'm going to spend the next few minutes complaining. And it's not just because of the current losing streak of the Jets. It is just kind of this recognition that, like, you and I have been doing this podcast for many years now. Before then, almost everybody in the conservative movement, like, first of all, there were people who were emphasizing that as bad as 3 Mile Island, accident was, Ted Kennedy's car killed more people. Now, you went back and they found out there were a couple of cases, probably about 40 cases of thyroid cancer over the ensuing 2 decades that they're never able to make it clear establishment, but may have been connected to the release of it. But nonetheless, because of that, not only did we not build a nuclear plant for decades afterwards, it just kind of became almost a punchline. There's a reason Homer Simpson works at a nuclear plant. And I thought about, like, the show's been on 35 years, and the opening credits are he's handling, like, glowing green plutonium, flipping it around, and it's bouncing around, and ends up in his shirt, and he throws it out the car window. Like, this just belief that, like, nuclear power plants are these ticking time bombs staffed by idiots, and, you know, the worst could happen at any given moment. You know, if you're like, oh, Jim, why do people, like, think about how many times people have seen The Simpsons. Like, it's been out for 35 years, and then in syndication and all that kind of stuff. And I think it just permeates the public sentiment about, oh, nuclear power is this really dangerous thing that we built years ago and we can't get rid of. The conservative movement just begins this Sisyphean effort over decades to make the argument of, you know, when everybody is trained properly, Chernobyl, and when everybody knows what they're doing and they don't cut corners and they're not run by Soviets, it works really, really well. And it's generally very safe, cost efficient. We had a solution for the waste problem. It's called Yucca Mountain. I mean, 49 states loved it. Admittedly, the Nevadans were not as, you know, but in the end, Harry Reid was Senate Majority Leader, so it had to be stopped. And that's why the Obama administration ultimately killed it without any scientific review. It was basically done because Harry Reid told them to. But other than that, like, you know, particularly if you reducing carbon emissions, because there's no smokestacks, but when you see stuff coming out the giant reactor, that's steam. It's not something dangerous. It's not something radioactive, anything like that. We've been making these arguments, as I said, for decades. And it has been a very slow process. And only like down in Georgia would you see just these, you know, well, we opened one more reactor, and it became this very slow process. And then overnight, all of a sudden, every decommissioned nuclear plant, everyone that can be recommissioned, there are some that are being dismantled and they're just too far in the process to start all over again. They're cropping up left and right. And what happened? Well, the tech companies came along and said, hey, we got in these data centers, we're researching AI. Lo and behold, it requires an enormous amount of electricity. So Microsoft is buying all of the electricity coming out of 3 Mile Island once they get it up and running again. You see all these small modular nuclear reactors being built. And on the one hand, this is great. On the other hand, we've been arguing in the public square for 20 years. And then Microsoft, Google, and Amazon show up and basically call up the governors and these companies. Hey, can I get a McNuke? And their answer was, sure. And we'd like side fries with that. They just, you know, all of a sudden, like that, it is, you know, rocking and rolling. All these Democratic governors are on board. Our 2 Democratic senators, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, are hunky-dory with it. The anti-nuclear power movement basically disappeared. The Philadelphia Inquirer wanted to find somebody to write an op-ed against the reopening of 3 Mile Island. And they got Jane Fonda, who, you know, from way back from the, like, playing the hits from all the golden oldies. You know, so why did the anti-nuclear power left environmentalist movement die? Well, ironically, the climate change left killed it. They basically said not reducing carbon is so important that nuclear power became the only realistic option, because no, windmills and solar panels are not going to do it. Solar panels can't work at night. Right? There's no sun. Can't do any good. Can't work in cloudy days, or has a tougher time working on cloudy days. Windmills can only work when the wind's blowing. Nuclear, what happens in a nuclear reactor works 24/7 for 40 years at a time, 50 years, 60 years at a time. It's much more reliable. So that's what's happening. On the one hand, I'm happy. On the other hand, I think it's a very, you know, like, revealing lesson in this, that if you want to see state government, private sector, everybody work together really fast, get the tech companies on board. If you can get Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of them except Tesla. You know, if Elon Musk says we want to do something, California will say, "No, you can't launch rockets anymore. Sorry, your political opinions are too extreme." But the other 6 big tech companies, when they want something to happen, everybody's like, "Yes, sir, we're getting right onto it." So, Greg, I know school choice is near and dear to your heart. If you can get the 6 big tech companies to say we need school choice, you will see school choice enacted coast to coast like that. So I'm happy, but just kind of this interesting recognition. Oh, as soon as as soon as people with $1 trillion budgets start coming along, all of a sudden that it's a priority. I guess, yes, it is a priority.
That's how politics happens. You got to have the Benjamins. You got to have the Benjamins to be sure. But heading in the right direction, to be sure. Don't build them on the Atlantic coast, especially in the southeast, and don't build them on fault lines. I would encourage. Yeah. So keep them away from tsunamis and hurricanes and earthquakes, and I think you're going to be just fine. definitely a move in the right direction. So speaking of wonderful tech companies, AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. But the problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. It's called Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price, and instead of variable regional pricing. And of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and half the cost of other clouds.
If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. Oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And this was so close to being a good martini, actually, from Kamala Harris. Interestingly, Joe Biden never made a public statement yesterday about the death of Yahya Sinwar at the hands of the IDF. But Kamala Harris did while she was campaigning in Wisconsin. And so credit where credit is due. Much of her mostly 3-minute long statement was actually pretty good. Here's the very beginning.
Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead. And justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands.
And here's another strong statement.
To any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this, we will always bring you to justice.
Good statement. Makes you wonder why they were so cozy and playing footsie with the Iranians the 4 years. But nonetheless, but then she says this, which is nothing new. This administration's been saying it all along. It immediately now wants a ceasefire with the usual outcome.
This moment gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza. And it must end such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
And she says that Hamas shouldn't be in power there, which I would also agree with. But again, the self-determination, Jim. So because we've had this conflict, because Hamas attacked Israel, because Israel did what it had to do to decimate Hamas, or is in the process of doing, somehow this is still supposed to lead to a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, not led by Hamas. So I don't know if she means Fatah, which in the West Bank, I think, was it 80-90% of the population supported what Hamas did on 10/7. I don't know where she thinks this responsible leadership is going to come from.
Greg, I have never felt so much like the Kamala Harris aides during the Bret Baier interview. Where just stop, that's good, stop, no, don't go any further, no, stop, just hit the brakes, take the exit. She just kept going. She had to, no, the first 2 sound bites that you played there were exactly what the moment called for. And this is not the first time. I remember during her convention speech, she emphasized that the U.S. would have, not just the biggest, most powerful, but the most lethal military on earth. She's capable of deploying hawkish rhetoric every now and then. And I know I can hear listeners scoffing and saying that they don't really believe that's really how she sees the world, that certainly that's not how she sounded in 2019. It also would have been nice if at some point, during her statement, she had gone back to, I'm going to say it was March 25th, 2024, where they asked her about Israeli forces going into Rafah, which, by the way, is where they found Sinwar.
Yep.
Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation. Well, that's where, Sinwar was. So if you want to get rid of the guy, you have to move in with military. And remember, it was not a drone strike. It was not an airstrike. It was a tank team that actually went in and got him. It would be nice if she could acknowledge, hey, remember when I told the Israelis not to go into Rafah? I guess they had to go into Rafah. I know we're never. She wants that statement to disappear into the air like dust, like Thanos had snapped his fingers. But she did say it, and she was wrong about that. And I think it indicates the wrong instincts she would bring to the table in a whole host of foreign policy issues. And just kind of furthermore, like 2 days ago, we needed to have a ceasefire, and Hamas needed to release the hostages. That's been the statement from Harris throughout the entire process. Well, Hamas it doesn't want to release if Hamas releases the hostages tomorrow, nobody's going to be happier than me. And I will happily say, go figure. I guess Sinwar really was the obstacle, and that's fine. And then you could consider, once the hostages are released, then we can talk peace. Until they aren't, they aren't. That was the message from Bibi Netanyahu today, and I think the headline, I can't remember which public, it was something like, Bibi promises more war. No mention of the conditions, no mention of hey, it's balls in your court, whatever's left of Hamas, release the hostages, and we can really have it, advance towards a ceasefire. But they won't. Now, hope that maybe this changes in the near future. Maybe whoever's left in charge of Hamas, and you figure it's significantly smaller than it was when it began, maybe they make that decision. But until they do, there's no reason for Israel to say, okay, we're going to stop firing because we've decided we've gotten enough of your guys. No. You still have our hostages. Let them go, and then we can talk peace.
Yeah, and that's just step one. This idea that there's going to be a formal Palestinian state that's going to be on either side of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, like in the end, the message is if a Palestinian state gets created because of this, it never would have happened without the October 7th massacre. So basically you're saying it'll take a while, but if you kill lots of people, we in the West will give you what you want.
All right. Well, we can't end the week on such a depressing note as that. So let's do it on a happier note. Tomorrow is October 19th, which, according to my records, is the 14th anniversary of the first episode of the Three Martini Lunch. Yes. We had very small children at the time. In fact, I didn't have any children at the time that we started this show. And Jim had two very young sons. And we were just before the 2010 midterms, which turned out very, very well, except for the re-election of Harry Reid, unfortunately, and a couple other things.
The dawn of the way to go, Nevada, way to go catchphrase of this program.
Yes, that goes back to the very early days of this program. And so, Jim, as we always do on the anniversary, a little bit of nostalgia. I know what everyone's waiting for, so we're going to hold off on that one till just the very end. But this is a montage from just the past few months. Here is how Jim Garrity has responded to the various eliminations of terrorist leaders. Appropriate, given our last martini there. First of all, this is early August when we found out how Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Tehran.
Well, first of all, Greg, Murder in a Tehranian Guest House is my favorite Agatha Christie novel. So many suspects, this really fascinating whodunit, and it turned out it was not a drone strike. It was not a candlestick in the conservatory. It was a planted bomb, apparently planted well ahead of time. Oh, by the way, my understanding is that this is now registered as the worst Airbnb ever. Very bad review for this one. I specifically requested a non-bomb room and non-smoking room, in fact. And before you knew it, everything was smoking. God, I'm bad. I'm going to hell. This is...
That's Haniyeh. Then, at the end of September, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the whole domino issue with Hezbollah. First of all, Hassan Nasrallah. And then just hours after being named the new Hezbollah leader, Yassin gets taken out by the Israelis.
Apparently, being the head of Hezbollah is the new equivalent of being the drummer in Spinal Tap. They just keep spontaneously combusting. Even Bill Belichick was Jets coach for one full day.
So then, just yesterday, Yahya Sinwar.
And he really seemed to think he was going to win this fight against Israel. And my first thought when I saw the news was, God, to make that kind of decision, what was going through his head? And the answer is shrapnel.
Jim, it's your compassion for the worst people on earth that really stands out.
Jim Garrity is opposed to murder, except when it's hilarious. And then I'm fully for it. So can you tell I write thrillers in which people die terrible, gruesome deaths on the side?
Oh, man. But of course, the one you're waiting for is from the summer of 2016 in the backdrop of a horrific event, which was the mass shooting, the ISIS-inspired mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. And then, as we found out later on, the shooter was on the radar and actually interviewed by the FBI twice, and they found no reason to arrest him. And then after the attack, we also found out that he and his wife had cased Disney World for a possible strike. Disney had tipped off the FBI, which did not follow up on that one, which led to a tweet from Stephen Miller, known as Red Steez, not the guy who used to work in the Trump administration, which triggered this whole conversation about a new security force at Disney.
What do they have to do to get rounded up?
right? I mean, like, just what is that threshold? Because in this case, this guy never tripped that threshold. And as a result of it, close to 50 people are dead.
You got me thinking when you mentioned what Stephen Miller said, that Mickey Mouse is doing more than the FBI to protect us. As the father, and we've mentioned this before, of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, that would be the greatest episode of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse ever.
Oh, hands where I can see him. Oh.
Hey, kids, you want to help us catch terrorists? Let's check out our Mouse-Catools. We're going to have a stun gun.
I'm picturing like Disney's 24. Copy that. Oh, I don't have time to explain. I will shoot your wife in the knee if you don't tell me where the bomb is.
Goofy's doing enhanced interrogation techniques. And...
Hope you like water. See, there's our good martini, Greg.
None of these bits ever get old, but man, that one's just the all-time classic. So Jim, happy 14 years and counting to you. We're doing great. We love doing it every day. We love our listener interaction and more exciting things coming on the horizon, including next week, actually.
Indeed. Thank you, Greg, for co-hosting and doing all the hard stuff. I just show up and try to say funny things. And thanks to all of our listeners. There is no program without you, because otherwise our boss would say, why are you doing this? No one's listening. So thank you for listening. And we try to, give you a laugh or two with the day's headlines, hopefully some insight, hopefully some way of making sense of the world. And hey, for once, it really is Friday.
Yes, it really is. So happy anniversary to not only us, but again, as Jim said, all of you who have faithfully listened, some for all 14 years, some obviously more recently. We're thrilled to have you with us. Tell your friends about us as well. And we've got a special guest coming up next week. We'll tell you about that early next week, and even some more fun coming in the very near future. So stay tuned for all of that. In the meantime, Jim, have a great weekend. See you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Again, tell your friends about us. Thank you also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.